Uh, hey, everybody, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we talk all the time about the Beatles. And sometimes it actually becomes a Badfinger channel once in a while here. And ever since Joey Molland passed away, I've been wanting to do a tribute show. And a few weeks ago, there was a special event that took place at the Cutting Room in New York City that was a tribute to Joey Molland. And I thought it would be a great idea to get some of the people who were there performing on stage as a tribute to be on this show. And these are all very special people and a few extra people as well. And let me introduce them all to you. First of all, a legend in Beatles history. You know him for the songs that John and Paul wrote for him and that George Martin produced him and Brian Epstein managed him. And he's gone on to record a lot of great stuff on his own, even most recently, even with one of the people that's also a special guest on the show here, and that's Billy J. Kramer. Hi, Billy.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Hey, Billy.
Pleasure to be here.
It's always great to have you here on the channel. You've been a guest a few times. You are family, and
Thank
you
you.
know that.
Thank you.
Also, I just alluded to someone who was involved with Joey Molland's last album and Billy's last album, and that's Mark Hudson, who produced both those albums. And you can share a lot of memories about working with Joey and what he was like as a songwriter, as a guitarist, you name it. Mark Hudson.
Hey, I
Hey.
didn't produce. I didn't produce Billy's thing. I wrote a song for it, but I think Lawrence Juber, our other friend, produced it. I think wasn't
It was,
me.
pro- yeah, it was produced by Lawrence and Jeff Perholtz.
Right. Okay. But
Yeah.
fantastic work on both those albums, and we'll talk about Joey's album in a few moments. The album called Be True to Yourself. Also, we have John Borack back. He's a writer for Goldmine magazine. He's written a few books of interest to Beatle fans, most recently Beatles 100, 100 Pivotal Moments in Beatle History. He also wrote Life is What Happens, a book on John Lennon many years ago. And he's also known as a power pop expert. He's written a couple of books on that subject. And I know he's a big Badfinger fan, so I thought it'd be great to invite him to the show. Hi, John.
Hello,
Hey,
great to
John.
be here. Good to see all of you.
Okay. We also have Drew Hill with us. If you've been to the Fest for Beatle fans, you can't miss him. He's there every single year. He's in the band Liverpool. He plays the keyboards there. He's always a great performer and great with the fans, and it's great to finally have you on my channel. Hi, Drew.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm amongst some amazing company here. So
Yeah.
it's a privilege.
And of course, my comrade in arms here, Darren DeVivo, who is part of the show Things We Said Today with me and Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. I also know him to be a big Badfinger fan as well, so he wanted to join us. So we have a great group of guests here. We're going to start with just talking about that tribute show a few weeks ago. How did it all get started? And, who was the catalyst in getting that together?
Well,
Well,
Ken
uh,
Dashow.
Mhm.
Ken Dashow contacted Mark, I
Right.
think. I think that was the start of it.
Yeah. I mean, he wanted me to put a band together, and that's rough enough as it is. But I wanted all of the money to go to Mary, Joey's beautiful girlfriend, and we all decided that's what we would do. So I hit the phones, and obviously one of the first guys I called was Drew, and then Bill, and then Steve Holly, and the list went on and on and on. Mark Morando. I started calling people, and all of them loved Joey Mullen, and all of them loved Badfinger. So it was an easy sell. If we were doing a tribute to the Village People, no one would have been there.
Darren would have been there.
Well, that's one.
Don't underestimate Darren.
And
But
so
it
we
was,
put we put it together, and it was a beautiful night. And by the way, there was no rehearsal. I sent songs to everyone, and then when we got there and did the sound check, we went through some stuff. So it was challenging but beautiful.
It was a great night.
how
Very
did,
memorable.
how did you decide the material? I mean, the obvious, the four big hits from Badfinger
Well,
had to be
uh,
done.
obviously, and I wanted to do the Ivy songs for those historians that knew that's how it started. And even Joey wasn't in the band yet, but the Ivies were the beginning of Badfinger. And then from that point, it was just fun. We did 3 songs from the album. And then at the end, I always try to do slow down when I'm on stage with Billy J,
Mhm.
because he sings it great. And then he like beats me up. He bumps into me and knocks me off the stage. And I kind of look forward to it.
Oh, that's always a treat every time you've done that at your shows and at the fest.
Yeah.
So, as well as like Working Class Hero, you're kind of known for your version of Working Class Hero now.
It's sort of one of my own, but I couldn't do it without Drew. Those were the guys that played it with me first. And I love doing it that way. It's pretty cool.
One of the things that I loved about that concert was that you took it a little step further and you did songs that Badfinger played on for the other Beatles.
Yes. Yes.
So, was that your decision, Mark?
Yes. I wanted to, because once again, the history of Badfinger is pretty sad. They fell into the business trap and got screwed by the manager.
We're
Suicide.
losing you.
And it's like their legacy is, does anyone know that they played on My Sweet Lord? Or what was the John Lennon song that you sang, Billy?
Yellow Sky.
Jealous Guy.
Hmm.
We had to add it.
Yeah. Yeah,
The ones in the end we just did because we wanted to like jam and end it with something big, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
and Billy's been doing Jealous Guy for several years. I've always loved his version.
Yeah, he does it great.
Thank you.
Well, it's real easy to sing good songs, and even when you think about the stuff that the Beatles have written individually that we've all copied or done versions of, that's some good songwriting right from the beginning.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's like the one you wrote for me, Mark. You know?
What's that?
I said that was a great song you wrote for my CD.
Thank you, Billy. Well, you're easy to write for because you have a great voice. And because you're from Liverpool, sometimes the accent really works.
You think it helps?
I've done it without you, you bastard.
We did.
No, but Joey was a joy to work with. You
Yeah.
know?
Were you always familiar with Badfinger's music, Billy, from the beginning?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Right from the start. No one get it. Actually, not long ago, I was in a dressing room with Joey, and and it's sad that I never got to do it, but we ran through Without You.
Oh,
Wow.
And we said, the next time we did a show together, we were going to, do it. I would love to have done that with him.
It was kind of interesting on that night. I produced Harry Nilsson's last record. And Drew, you got to play with Harry, and he was really a piece of work, but a great piece of work. And he truly was. And when we were going to do Without You, I just said to the band, I can't do the short bad finger. Can't live.
Uh-oh.
So,
And Joey and Harry.
uh-huh.
Hello.
Yeah, we we had a lot of trouble with your audio there, Mark. If you could just
sounded like
what
Donald
you were
Duck.
just saying.
Well, usually whenever I sing, people turn off the audio.
Well,
So,
the voices in your
like
head
Donald
started
Duck.
coming out, so it was a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
well, I'm driving, so if I go in an area where I lose it, just someone talk for me.
Okay.
or sing for him.
That's good.
I get to lip sync. This would be interesting.
Let's ask each of you if you remember when you first heard Badfinger's music. Was it automatically Come and Get It? Since that was their first big hit. By the way, I just want to add, Mark, I love the fact that you put Maybe Tomorrow into the set list there because
Yeah,
that's
great
such a
song.
great song. That's a song that should have been a major hit.
Major. I bought that record. I bought the 45 when I
Uh-huh.
was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the orchestrations in it. They're really beautiful. I loved pulling them apart and getting the opportunity to perform it. Yeah, it was beautiful. Great song.
Yeah. You know,
And you know what's great about having a guy like Drew, because Drew knows music so well. When I said to him, you gotta do the horns have to be there on the, he goes, Marky, stop worrying about it. Because he has patches and switches, and then he's a walking orchestra.
you always need someone like that.
Made my job a lot easier. And he can
Yeah.
sing great too.
Mhm. By the way, I know that that show was recorded, right?
I don't know.
Because there were cameras going on and screens, and I would have thought, I was hoping that the show was recorded anyway.
Well,
Yeah, no, I
no
do.
one told me about it. I mean, I was doing all of that for Joey, for Mary, and for Joe Jr. and all that
Okay.
stuff. And I called, another guy that I should give some credit to was Paul Davey, who was a friend of Joey's, who used to run like the Badfinger site and the Joey Molland site. And he had so much information, I had to invite him to come and play. So I tried to make everybody that loved Joey be there. And Steve Hawley,
Mhm.
don't get any better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Steve is hoping to join us. I know he's got some session work to do today, but I said you can pop in whenever you want, so hopefully he'll be here. But
I
let's go
want
back to my question about when you first heard Badfinger and what got you into them. Were you a massive fan from the very start? How did all that work out for all of you? Um,
Well,
Billy, you were talking just now about it.
I like the first record, but then when they brought out Day After Day,
Uh-huh.
I thought that was such a great record, you know.
yeah,
And the Harry Nilsson thing effect, when I found out that they'd written that song for Harry Nilsson, I was like blown away. It was such a great song. I mean, I think, if I was to say that the top writers and, that have been very successful have been the Beatles, the Bee Gees, and that thing to me,
Hmm.
you
right,
know,
right.
it's all great songs. Of course,
Well,
Mark's written some great songs too.
Yeah.
I bought the Ivy record as a 45 when I didn't even know that it was going to be Badfinger, because it was a beautiful melody. It was kind of Beatlesque. But then when I heard Come and Get It, that was the end of my world. Like, okay, I know what these guys are. And then later on, when you find out that Paul had written, McCartney wrote the song and then demanded that they did the song just like the demo, which they did.
Yeah.
And that was a Beatle demo, and that they did it just like that. And then that was it. And then by the time, no matter what, I kind of have a funny thing with Joey. And I said to him, no matter where you are, Joey Molland, when you're singing No Matter What, I'm coming on stage and singing it with you. And he called me a bastard, whatever. But every time he would do it, I'd go up, he'd smile, and I would do the high, not down the old gray wall. I would do it. And I was blessed. I loved Badfinger. And even the album cuts, they were fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
What was it like making the last album, Mark?
What's that, Billy?
What was it like making the last album with Joey?
Well, he had some songs, and he was sort of, maybe depressed is the wrong word, but he thought, oh, no one wants to hear me, blah, blah, blah. And I said, Joey, just play me some stuff. And he did. And then he sent me a CD, and it was all unfinished, like little McNuggets. And then I said to him, as a fellow songwriter, we need to sit in a room and let's do some work on it. And that's when some of the Markyisms came to play. And he loved what we were doing. And then it's just a matter of working. But I did it like old school, not like the kids now. So it wasn't like, Billie Eilish with her brother on a computer in her mom's bedroom. I was in the studio yelling at people. Steve Hawley, this, that, that. That's how I make records. So it was guys in the room playing like we used to in the old days. And Joey was in heaven. He was in heaven. And I told him not to worry about his voice. I told him just to believe it. And he said, well, I can't sing like Peter. I said, well, you're not Peter, you're Joey.
That's right.
He smiled, gave a hand gesture that I can't do on the air. And it worked out beautifully. Like, I love that. I'm proud of that record. I love that record.
You should be. It's beautifully produced. And the thing about Joey is, and I hate this having to say this after the fact, but he always was humble. The thing that got me, we did a lot of live shows together, a ton. And the one thing that I can say is that every time he hit the stage, he was an up and coming 22-year-old guitarist.
Absolutely.
And his attitude was always, always that. It was fresh. He was my favorite guitarist to work with, hands down. And I told him that too. I said, you're just like a kid. You're a constant kid. And the
He was
beauty
like
of it
a
is the
kid.
fact that when we got a chance to do some of the rockers, outside of the Badfinger stuff, and he just wanted to play, and we'd pull anything out of the hat. You look at his face taking solos, and he just had that same kind of fire in his eyes. But he was humble, like you said about nobody wants to hear my stuff. Nobody.
Yeah.
He didn't really believe that people were that interested. He never fell into that trap of self-grandization. You know what I mean?
Well,
And
we all fall into that at one point. And especially the older we get, it's like, God, who wants to put up with my stuff? But
right.
you know what? Everybody should put up with everybody's stuff. And Joey Molland was the real deal.
Well, Joey had to deal with the same kind of situation that the Beatles did. You had three really great songwriters in Badfinger, actually a fourth one with Mike Gibbons, that all contributed really good songs. They all sang very well.
Yeah.
So was Joey always in the shadow of Pete and Tommy, kind of like
Well,
George?
I mean, I'm sure there had to be. It's kind of like George Harrison, fighting to get it on a Beatle record, and then he did All Things Must Pass, and it was all the songs that he wanted the Beatles to do that they were saying no. And he kind of made his point when it became huge.
Mm.
I mean, that's how I look at it. I could be wrong, but
yeah,
that's
talk
how I
about
see it.
your becoming a Badfinger fan, how that started, and just the beginning of that. Do you
You
hear
talking to
me?
me?
Yeah, John.
Oh, sorry, I didn't. You dropped out for a second.
Yeah.
Well, my introduction to Badfinger, I was eight years old and shopping for records at a Kmart in Southern California. And anything that was on the Apple Records label, I was going to buy because I was already a huge Beatles fan. I remember buying the Instant Karma single with the picture sleeve, 57 cents at Kmart. And then I saw this song by a group called Badfinger. I didn't know who they were. Eight years old. What do I know? But I see Paul McCartney in real small letters under the title. I mean, wow, did Paul McCartney write this song? And I took it home, and that was the beginning of the love affair. I mean, just so many, not only the singles, but as someone mentioned earlier, the album cuts, just everything. All their records have so many amazing moments, and I honestly think Wish You Were Here is one of the best albums ever by anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought it was their best. Everyone tends to lean towards Straight Up, and that's brilliant, but Wish You Were Here was something special.
Yeah, I think maybe because it didn't have any hit singles on it, people tend to overlook it a little bit. But overall, top to bottom, so many great songs on there. And Joey had a great one on there, Gotta Get Out of Here, which was just this amazing sort of vibe to the song. You could really feel what he was singing. And, with all the managerial conflicts and money issues they were going through at the time, you could really feel that in his vocals to that song.
Yeah.
Actually, with the recent reissue of Head First, there's a couple songs in there that Tommy wrote that was all about problems with management and
Yeah,
and I was surprised that they got away with it, putting that
yeah.
out.
I think one was called Mr. Manager.
Yeah.
So that's not very subtle, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely important in their writing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Were you impressed, John, and the rest of you, at the fact that, are you drawn to bands kind of like the Beatles, where you have several really good singers? In this case, they're all good, and all good songwriters. And that's just so rare because most bands that are out there have one lead singer or two, and they have one or two songwriters. But in Badfinger, everyone stood out and they all had their own songs. And it's kind of like the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac and those bands. But are you drawn more to those type of bands because there's so much more to appreciate for what each member brings?
For me, not necessarily, but I will say that even though there were four songwriters in Badfinger, it didn't feel like there were four separate types of music. With Raspberries, for example,
Hmm.
you had Eric Carmen writing songs, and you had Dave Smalley, and you had Wally Bryson. You could tell who was doing what. You know, Dave did the country rockers, Wally did the hard rockers, wanted to sound like Free, and Eric did all the power pop stuff. With Badfinger, you couldn't always tell just by listening who wrote what. It was really
I could
very
all,
unified, and I think that's what made them. Well, one of the things that made them a really really great band.
Interesting. Darren, how do you feel about that as far as bands where you have several songwriters and lead vocalists all contributing? Do you find that more interesting? Do you prefer bands like that?
I actually haven't. I never really gave it a thought about, a band that's centered around one or two people. I mean, not to get off topic, but one of my favorite groups is Chicago, and there you had a group that had three powerhouse lead singers,
Yeah.
and then even the later um, variation of Chicago still came at you with a couple of different powerful voices. Um, I don't think I actually ever gave it a thought. To me, um, you know, three distinctive voices. It was one sound, though, for Badfinger.
Hmm.
Joey Molland was a great addition for that group. It was a seamless, if you want to call it, transition, him coming into the group.
Right. Well, see, I always loved harmony bands. I mean, the Beatles were definitely one.
Yeah.
Badfinger. I mean, you can start Crosby, Stills, and Nash, three individual guys, four counting Neil,
Yeah.
all of them great in their own way, but then singing the harmony, you're blown away. And then obviously with the loss of the great Brian Wilson,
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
that's a whole nother thing. And I got to work with him. He sang on one of the Ringo records, and
That's right. Yeah.
I took every note that he was singing. And he walked into my studio that looked sort of like Yellow Submarine, and he went, "Oh, it's really peppy. Do you do pills?" I went, "No, I don't." and Ringo kind of gave me a glance, and I don't want to digress from Joey now, but Brian Wilson said, "Could I get a Perrier and a cup of coffee?" So I went, "All right," and I was in heaven because I was reared. If you give me harmonies by the Beatles, Brian Wilson, Freddie Mercury, I'm in heaven. And I sent the second engineer to bring the stuff back. And Ringo's sitting there waiting. And he comes in with a coffee and a Perrier. And Brian went, "I can't drink coffee and I hate Perrier."
Yeah.
And Ringo looked at me like, "Well, okay." But you know what? As soon as he heard the song, that other thing kicked in.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Joey's guitar playing. Once he knew what the chord changes were, I didn't have a lot to say. And those are the people that I love. And I'm sure Badfinger, I'm definitely Crosby, Stills, and Nash, or the Beach Boys. They came individually, but when they were together, there's nothing better than that.
No one ever thinks about Elton John's band from the 70s for that
Oh,
also.
I do.
The
Well,
harmonies of the
yeah,
Dee Murray and Nigel Olsson and David Johnstone.
Right. And they sang all those backgrounds.
Yeah.
yeah. Talk about a team. My God.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you, Mark, because you mentioned Brian Wilson and the song that you were referring to, which is one of my favorite of Ringo's solo songs, is In a Heartbeat. Do you know how did Brian get involved with uh
Well, no, we had,
being on the album?
we had written the song, Ringo and I, and it goes uh, without understanding. And he went, no good vibrations. And Ringo went, oh, maybe I'll just call Brian and have him sing. And I went, okay. So Ringo called up Brian, and Brian, of course, was going to say, okay. And he did. He showed up, and as soon as he knew what it was going to be, everything is for like the one thing that I learned, and I forced Joey into it as well. It's not just double tracked. He goes, when you're doing background vocals, if you do backing vocals, and they should all be 4 tracks. And I didn't know what he meant. And he goes, well, because when you do 2 tracks, he goes, the timbre in your voice kind of goes like this and makes it flutter. When you do 4, it's fluttering so much that it becomes solid.
Ah,
And from that day forth, on every record, on Billy J's record, on Joey's record, boom, all the backing vocals are 4 tracks just because of Brian Wilson.
Wow.
That's you know what, I think we were all lucky, and I don't want to be romantic or anything, but the fact that we're in the cocktail hours of our life, we were around when music was truly incredible. Just think about it. And Billy, you were right there in the center of it, Billy J. And we were all wishing, but be there through the Who and the Beatles and the Stones and Marianne Faithfull, and the list goes on and on and on. Unbelievable. I feel blessed that I was around that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Too.
Yeah.
Really.
Me too.
Since you worked with Harry Nilsson and you were good friends, how did Harry do the arrangement, or was it Richard Perry for Without You, that version?
No. Harry was a force to be reckoned with, and that's when he was sober. He was a force to be reckoned with, but he knew exactly who he was, and he knew exactly what he wanted, and he was adamant about it. And he got into huge fights with Richard, and it didn't end up well because he stopped producing him. But the real quick story: Harry was doing a thing in Van Dyke Parks, who is a friend of mine and plays on everything that I do. Right. Harry said to him, he had written a string arrangement, and Harry went, I want it all to be saxophones. And Van Dyke went, Harry, you can't have 26 saxophones. And he goes, oh, yes, I can. I'm Harry Nilsson. And when he said that, I said to hey, what happened? And Van Dyke went, I did a 26-piece saxophone orchestra. And I go, and how was it? He goes, it sucked so bad that Harry stopped it while we were recording it. And that's Harry Nilsson. And Drew, you got to sing with him at, I think, a Beatles Fest. He sang with you, yeah? Harry?
A bunch of them. Yeah, we did a bunch of shows together, and it was like quite a privilege. I mean, it's a strange thing. The last live thing we did was just me on piano. It was in Chicago, and Harry came up and sat down on a stool. He sang a bunch of his songs, and I just sang some harmonies here and there. But and he wasn't well, but he still pulled it off, and the crowd, you could hear a pin drop.
No, well, I mean, obviously, his voice early on would have given McCartney a run for his money.
Yeah.
You think about some of that, me and my arrow, very McCartney-esque. But when Lennon produced Pussycats, Harry wanted to be John, And that's when, Too Many Rivers to Cross, he started doing like Lennon's Mother, You Had Me. And Harry did that, but it destroyed him. And then you throw in the drinking and smoking. But you know what? On this record, it was about the songs, as usual. And even though his voice wasn't the Harry that did Without You, he still knew how to sell it. Yeah. And I was blessed for that reason. I'm like the luckiest man in the world, working with all these people, with the Drewski, with Billy J, with Ringo, with everyone that I've worked with. I can't even believe I got invited. Yeah. And here I am. I'm lucky.
When it comes to the songs that Joey wrote with Badfinger, and you can go into his solo albums too, are there any that stand out as favorites for you?
Oh yeah.
John?
Oh, I've got one definitely. From the Badfinger album, Andy Norris.
Oh yeah.
Love that one. That's like punk rock before there was punk rock.
Yeah.
If you think about it, and it's just got a really, the guitar part is cool. The scream at the end is just really amazing. Such a propulsive song, and it's one of my favorites.
Okay. Would you say that, there's great Joey songs on every Badfinger album? Because I can certainly single out on each one favorites.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, since he contributed fewer songs than, Tommy and Pete did, obviously the really good ones were the ones that were going to make the album. So every album there was, I mentioned Got to Get Out of Here earlier.
Yeah.
That's another favorite of mine. But yeah, every album has some great Joey songs for sure.
I just whipped up a list before we started of like 10 off the top of my head, not having listened to Say No More in a long time. So that one I nothing jumped off that had I listened to it. It might have, but if it seemed as though Joey was also really coming into his own as a songwriter as the 70s wore on. So in a way, Wish You Were Here had, in my opinion, the biggest concentration of great Joey Molland songs. Got to Get Out of Here, Love Time, and both medleys, which both feature Joey Molland, doing half the song. Meanwhile, Back at the Ranch, Should I Smoke, and In the Meantime, and some other time. I grabbed Give It Up off the Badfinger album.
Yeah.
Love Is Gonna Come at Last from Airwaves.
Oh, beautiful.
And from Ass, Icicles, and I Can Love You. I Can Love You is one of the great Badfinger songs. I wrote something here, but I meant from
Sometimes.
Sometimes I wrote something.
That's one of mine.
And of course, Sweet Tuesday Morning might have been the first song where Joey really, I've arrived.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree.
So like I say, I always liked Say No More, but it has been eons since I've listened to it. So I neglected to put anything from there on there. But I mean, you see, as the Apple years morph into the Warner Brothers years, seems like Joey really was blossoming as a songwriter. It's a shame the way the course how things went for Badfinger, that by the time the mid-70s came, it was slowing down for them, for lack of a better way of putting it. And Natural Gas didn't get beyond one album, and then next thing you know, here comes punk, new wave, disco, and the whole playing field changed.
Yeah, it started to suck.
I was trying to be diplomatic.
I know I'm sounding old, and hey, you know what? Music is great. I think by the time we got to the 90s, we were in trouble. I did. And now it's weird because, I'm not name dropping, but I also produced Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
And he won 2 Grammys. And by the way, Ozzy Osbourne is as big of a Beatles / Badfinger fan as we all are. Point blank.
Yep.
And he said to me, "Oh, Mark, I won 2 Grammys." I went, "Ozzy, that's great." He goes, "But are we allowed to swear or no?"
You can do it. Only you can do it. I'll let you.
I don't want to ruin it. He goes, I got my award at 2:30 in the afternoon. And I went, "What?" He goes, "Well, there's no more rock and roll anymore. The only 2 rock and roll people were Adele and that homosexual Harry Styles." I went, "Ozzy, he's not. Does not start calling names. But you think I'm unfiltered? Whoa." And he's actually right. When you think about it, rock and roll, as we all know it, is having a little trouble. And those last guys, Greta Vans, they look like they should be in Lord of the Rings. Real small guys with big feet.
Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah, right. Sorry, Drew. But it's sort of like, that's it. And we look at it like it's a Walmart version of Zeppelin, because we were around when Zeppelin was. Yeah. The kids don't know.
Mark, refresh my memory. What Ozzy albums did you work on?
Osmosis, and I produced the Undercovers, which was him doing all of the cover, which he did Working Class Hero, did Woman. I produced and did that and the entire thing.
Okay.
And we also wrote a Broadway show that has not made it there yet on Rasputin.
Oh, wow.
And when you hear Ozzy going like, "This writers did it," if you thought what Rasputin would sing like, he'd be singing like Ozzy. And a huge Beatles fan. Like, he has a picture of him and Paul McCartney. He put like on a $20,000 gold frame, because the Beatles to Ozzy Osbourne were epic. And then I talked to him once about doing Joey's album. He goes, "Well, wasn't that the little one who looked like McCartney?" I went, "Yes." Joey was Badfinger.
Uh-huh.
And not that the other guys weren't cute, but they weren't Joey.
Wants to mention a few other Joey songs that you want to highlight here.
I like Suitcase.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Billy.
Really.
I like that song.
Suitcase going right into Sweet Tuesday Morning, 2 Joey songs back to back. So really cool. Drew, do you have any?
Flying.
Okay.
Yeah. I know it's interesting because it's like we equate albums, the quality, by the success rate often, and I think if you were to ask the artist, it's very likely the least popular song on the album is the one that they love the most. And too often that's the case, that other songs get overshine. And with Joey, I think we all concur that he wrote some amazing stuff that even on his own would have fared quite well. It is tough though when you're overshadowed by some hits that it's Pete's stuff, and it's hard to stand up to that. It also is hard for a band to be one of the branches of the Beatles, and everybody says, "Well, you're just like the Beatles," and then when you put out an album that says "just like the Beatles," they say, "Oh, you sound too much like the Beatles." But there's no escaping it. George Harrison produced you. You come from Apple. You were launched by the Beatles in its own right. And I feel like this whole rating an album or rating songs, it's a vague category for me.
You're right, Drew. You know something else, Drewski? It's like, John Lennon was the guy that said there's only 12 notes. Yeah. And we're all influenced by somebody. And when Beatles with McCartney, "Oh, tell me," he's doing Little Richard. Yeah. Which was his. So by the time you got to Badfinger, how could they not be influenced by the Beatles?
But people were brutal in their criticisms, and that's the part that I just read an article the other day of the review of Straight Up when it first came out, and they were brutal. I mean, everything they were saying is if they did anything, they just wanted the previous album, and they didn't get it, and they were angry. And meanwhile, Badfinger, in a sense, they were starting to expand, much like the Beatles, in a sense, as we were saying, that Joey and the other ones, they started to develop their own writing skills, their own, melodic understanding. And it was a beautiful thing. But the critics,
Yeah.
they could, they got scolded if they went left, they got scolded if they went right. Management was all over them. How they maintained a creative head in the midst of all this negativity is mind boggling. I keep
I
thinking,
agree.
I quit. I'm gonna go get a farm and move somewhere.
Well, the same thing happened back then to McCartney when he released the Ram album. I mean, now it's considered a classic, but back then critics
Yeah.
hated it, couldn't
Yeah,
stand
my
it.
favorite. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Even when it came
same
out, it was
here.
my favorite.
Yep, same here.
But
Yeah.
fame is a double-edged sword. And I'm sure that Badfinger went through criticism in that there are probably a lot of music critics who said, well, you're successful because you're on the Beatles label. You got the Beatles backing. You got Paul McCartney writing Come and Get It. You got George Harrison producing day after day, to the point where even no matter how talented they are, they have their own identity, they have their own sound. Yes, they were influenced by the Beatles, but how do you escape the identity with the Beatles?
You see,
Right.
And
I
Billy
really,
can relate to that, I'm sure, with all the success that he had with Lennon McCartney songs, even though he went on to have other hits. It's very tough to deal with that.
Well, the
yeah,
thing
but
is,
go ahead.
they were band things. I wasn't a band. You understand what I mean, Ken?
Yeah.
I was a guy fronting a band and just interpreting the songs the way I did, you know.
Right. Well,
But you
you
know,
know, the is what on Joey's solo album that's called "Be True to Yourself."
Hmm.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about Badfinger and the very same thing we're talking about now. And then, obviously, when we get old and bitter, like the are, he was he would just go, you know what? This is
But
me.
Billy, you did that.
It,
Billy, you
it,
did that. You were true to yourself and turned me up. You
yeah,
found Beatles.
to be true to yourself. And he goes, I'm Joey Molland. This is who I am. This is what I do. I think that when you do that is when you can actually make it. It's what the Beatles ended up doing. Even though they had their influence, they were being true to what they were. What could Badfinger not be? Not a band on Apple Records was a Beatle band. Some of the stuff that they signed, I don't even understand. But
they had their own identity, Mark.
yeah, I agree. Great,
Yeah,
Bill.
I do too.
You know, they had their own, the sound of their vocals was very identified. You know, it was instant.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as you heard it,
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people make records, a lot of bands that just doesn't happen. But the odd one that has that particular magic, which they had, you know, the Beatles, Badfinger, the Beach Boys, it's a very identifiable sound.
Hmm.
no
I can't
question
forget
about it.
George Martin on that one either, because I feel like if there was a fifth Beatle, and the reason why I say that is because it seemed when you listen to a lot of tracks from the time, you hear the mixes, but then when you hear a Beatles song, it's solid. It's like a jet flying. No matter what song, you don't hear any, like with the Rolling Stones, you hear a lot of, because they were a blues band and they were loose. But the Beatles, they were so self-contained, like a single unit, and the mix, the way they carried through, just it still stands today as the litmus. And you have these apps in your computer that are imitating the Abbey Road studio to try and capture that one guitar sound that they did with this
And
archaic box and a guitar. It's like
you can't
it's
capture it
hilarious.
because it was the people playing it that made
Uh-huh.
them. And oh gosh, I know what I want to do. You kids talk among yourselves. I'm gonna call Melissa and have her bring down. I took a piece of Abbey Road floor, which I'll show you in a minute. You kids talk while I have it.
Do they know about it?
Oh
Bill,
no, I had to tell Ringo, or the engineer was going to kill me.
Julie, you want to share with us? You were on a cruise with Mark, what that was like.
Wait, baby,
Really?
can you bring
Well,
road?
well, Joey, to me, was a
Bring it down to
scouser.
me now.
No, but I was saying you were on a cruise with Billy and with Mark. What was that experience
Yeah.
like?
Well, Joey, it's you won't talk too much about it for me, but we had so much fun. We would go to dinner, all of us, Billy, me,
Very
and,
nice.
and we, every night, and the stories were just so laughable and so beautiful that it was a situation where we never forget. Now, on the downside of something, a diabetic, like a type 1 diabetic, like the alcoholic overweight diabetic, but like juvenile, where I have to shoot insulin. And
Yeah.
Joey was a diabetic as well. And our room on the boat were, and knock on my door, and it was Mary. And she went, Mark, Joey's having a diabetic reaction, and I don't know what to do. Do you? And I went, okay, I'm coming over. So I got my sugar tabs. I got all the stuff that I usually do. I walk in, and Joey was on the way out. I'm talking passing out. Could have been the end. And plugged his nose, threw down some of my sugar stuff, got a thing of orange juice, called 911 on the boat, and they came down and saved him. And it was so weird because when he thanked me, he goes, Mark, you saved my life, you bastard. Like he called me a name for saving him. Okay. I have some history here I have to share. Thank you, Melissa. Okay. We were doing the Christmas album. Yeah, I will. We were doing the Christmas album with Ringo.
Yeah.
We were in Abbey Road. And I go, where did you guys? He goes, it was a big studio, you bastard. We only set up in a corner. And the corner of the room, like this little area, is where the Beatles would do the tracking. So it wasn't the grand 50-piece orchestra. It was like this little area. I went, wow. And I went down there just because I wanted to be near it. And I looked down on the floor, and they were cutting a hole in the wall so they could run tie lines into the studio and record an orchestra in there, but have it go to a studio that wasn't in there, that kind of thing. And I looked down, and as I was walking, I kind of heard the floor go, I went, oh. Look down, and I went, hey, that's a piece of Abbey Road. And I went to the engineer, Scotty, give me a screwdriver. Mark, don't do that. You better not. Scotty, give me a screwdriver. He gives me a screwdriver. I walked down there, took my shoe off, and just hit the floor. And a piece of Abbey Road floor came up in my hand. Put it in my coat pocket, and then thinking like a thief, I got to get out of here. So I walk upstairs and go, let's take like a half-hour break, because I was going to bring it back to the hotel. And Scotty said, Scotty, give me a hug. And when he hugged me, he could feel the floor against him. And he goes, you better call Ringo. Like he threatened me. I went, okay. I get on the phone. Hello, Mark. I had to tell you, I took a piece of Abbey Road's floor. And he goes, where did you do it? And I went, where you used to set up the drums. He goes, all right, that's good with me. As long as he knew the floor was where his drum kit was, I was okay to be a thief. So I share it with one and all. A piece of Abbey Road,
Okay,
is with me.
And they're
That's
wondering
amazing.
why when people walk in that area, they fall through the floor.
I had to do it.
Few sprained
I
ankles.
had to.
No, I
That's
get it.
funny.
It was good.
well, I think all of us would have done the same thing.
I think so
I
too.
think so.
I think so. Well, Billy, you recorded your album there.
I did, yeah.
To the floor.
Wow.
It was great. It was so strange, Mark, being, and I was stood exactly where John Lennon sat at the piano and played Bad to Me. All these years later, it was like,
But
and
did
I
you
still,
did you remember it? Like when you were in there, did you get the feeling of, oh, this is where it all was?
yeah,
Wow.
it just took me instant. It was like instant. And I stood on the same place where I did Bad to Me, From a Window, I'll Keep You Satisfied, Trains and Boats and Planes, I Call Your Name, right near Mrs. Mills's piano.
Uh,
Wow.
Still there.
Yeah, it's still there.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's weird, because I'm talking to Joey, because me being, I love the Beatles completely. I didn't really have a favorite, but if I did have a favorite, it would have been Lennon. And McCartney's melodies and all that stuff, beautiful. But Lennon sort of had an edge that was really attractive to me. And I said to Joey one time in the studio, I went, Joey, tell me a story like when you went to John's house and you played on that stuff. And it's weird talking to guys like Joey. They were a part of it. But to us, it's like, oh my God, you were at John Lennon's house. Joey went, yeah, but we were lost and didn't know where we were. So they walked into the room and he goes, and it was filled with Dr. Pepper, like the soft drink. But I'm talking cases of it. And he goes, and then John came in and said, what are you doing in here? And they went, we're lost. He goes, stay out of my pepper room. And I went, Dr. Pepper? No, Dr. Pepper. Okay. He was the Dr. Pepper guy.
Yeah.
But that's when Joey gave me a story that none of us knew, Pretty cool.
Let me ask you, Mark, when you were recording Be True to Yourself, the album,
Yeah.
did you just reach a point with Joey where he didn't really care whether it sold or not? He just cared about the songs and how well they came across? Because, all these years of not having a hit record, um, did he pick you because you thought that commercially?
No, you know what? It wasn't a matter of power pop or whatever. It's sort of like the first two songs were the ones that were kind of difficult, like Giving Birth. It was a lot of work to get that in there, right? With Steve Holly on drums, Julian Lennon singing backing vocals,
Yes.
Whatever that is. But all of a sudden, after he heard the first two songs, and we started with This Time, and then it might have been or something. And when he heard the tracks finished, is when he came to me and he goes, you know what, Mark? This isn't a matter of me selling records. I would love it if it does, but it's a matter of me doing music I love. And when he said that to me, that gave me my wings to go, okay, so now if it sells, great. If it doesn't, great, because you're being true to yourself and you're doing Joey Molland's record. And that's what he wanted to do. So the first two was a little bit of angst. And then he just went, this is so much fun. And we had such a great time that we just let it flow. And he was happy with that. Now, I'm sure he would have loved to have a hit. But you know what? Everybody would now. So many guys aren't making records now because nothing's selling.
Yeah.
There's not a new Billy record. There's not you can name them. There isn't. A Rod Stewart. No. Because it's not selling. But if you love what you do, just do that. And that's good enough. And Joey loved making that record.
Sometimes I fall into this pattern of, all these veteran artists that we love and admire, and they're still putting out great music like Joey was and Billy's doing and the stuff he did with Ringo. And I'm saying, if Vertical Man came out in 1975, that would have been a top 10 album,
Yeah.
But
I know.
times have changed, and it's very frustrating because it has nothing to do with the quality of the music. They're still putting out great stuff.
Well, no, see, but it also has to do with age. I'm a huge Gladys Knight fan, and I
Sure.
got to work with her in Cuba. And you can take anybody that you want to. There's not a person out there now that can do a song like Gladys Knight can do. Just, she was incredible. But you reach that certain age, and next thing you know, you start to sag, the lips don't work anymore, and they look at you like yesterday's news, which has nothing to do with how talented you are or aren't. Joey was the last. I tried to make him do the title of the album. We took a picture. He got lost, and he was out in the middle of the highway trying to flag someone down, and I took a picture. And he's really, really tiny. Well, he was tiny anyway, but he looked like an aerial picture of a human.
Yeah.
You'll get that joke after we hang up. I said, why don't we call it The Last Badfinger? And he went, well, that's a great title, but I don't want to do that to the boy. I said, well, Joey, if you own the name and you are, in fact, The Last Badfinger, as soon as Len heard me say Badfinger, he said, where do you want me to go? I'll be there tomorrow. How many do you want me to sing? And that doesn't mean that Joey Molland's name was any less, but as soon as you hear that one thing, it's a turn on. And he wouldn't do it because of the legacy of the band, but I wanted to call it The Last Badfinger because it would have been a great title as him being and it would have gotten an audience that loves Badfinger that might not even know who Joey is. You could say Peter Ham, and they wouldn't know what that is now. They would think it's a breakfast meal.
Right.
Yeah.
So
well, that's why when Joey toured, he had to go as Joey Molland's Badfinger.
That's what I mean. He didn't want to do it, and because I'm just the producer and he's the act, I had to respect that, and that's what is important.
I think maybe he wants to get his own personality across, away from the Badfinger thing.
Yeah, but that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to get rid of. When you're John Lennon no matter what you're doing. Right. And I think the same thing with Badfinger. Joey's Badfinger, and even the songs that we did on this album are reminiscent of Badfinger. I mean, it was his band. It's what he knew. So he was happy just to do it. And I thought that was incredible. I thanked him.
He had a lot of enthusiasm.
Oh, Joey. Gosh.
He was a Scouser.
Yeah, no question, Liverpudlian. And it was weird because I said that on the night of the concert when he goes, Mark, have you ever had sausage? And I thought it was a venereal disease, but it's a thing that they eat in Liverpool. I guess it's like sausage on toast, and it's this thing that they do. And I almost had to go to a rehab because I got so addicted to it. They're like incredible. And he was Scouser through and through. Yeah. No question.
Let me ask you, Mark, and you, Billy, since you had, direct relationship with Joey. I interviewed him several times, and he was, nothing but joy to talk to. He was always very up, always very positive. Did he ever talk to you about, the heartaches that he went through? I mean, there's this one time, and I said this in one of my shows. I saw him in concert once, and after the concert, he actually said to the crowd, "I'm a lucky guy." Now, I know that if I was in his position, and I was in a band that got screwed by their manager, and I had two members that committed suicide, and then a third one who died young, the drummer, and I had a wife that died of cancer, I mean, I know that you have to look at the bright side of everything. Always look on the bright side of life. But yes. He probably looked at the fact that he was lucky, that he got a contract, he was on the Beatles record label, he worked with the Beatles and all that, but he had so much, hardship in his life. Did he ever talk to you about that, or was he always very positive with you?
No, he was always positive, but he said that he never got over the suicides of Peter and Tommy. And he goes, to this day. And evidently from what Joey said to me, like he had talked to Ham, Tommy, the day before he killed himself.
Right.
And he goes, I so wish I would have done something. And I think he carried that with him, like forever. And then obviously the loss of his wife, hasn't gone away.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know how he functions with all that negativity.
Yeah.
You know,
I know. You're right.
It shows character.
Yeah, but it's also the sorrow behind it is, every story has a dark side or a bad side. And remember when the Beatles broke up, we were thinking of blaming everybody for their breakup. Oh, Paul hates John now. John, Yoko is this, blah, 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 blah. And it had nothing to do with the Yokester. It had nothing to do. It was the timing. It was time. More songs that he wanted to have heard, and they didn't want to do it. I think Joey fell into place with Badfinger, knowing that Pete was really the lead singer. Tommy was second lead singer, and Joey was sort of the George Harrison guy in that band. But remember, by the time it got to Abbey Road, when you start to look at something and the George Harrison song on that record, he was pretty much an equal. Loving John and Paul as I do, George stepped up, and he didn't become the third guy. He became one of the guys.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
A force to be reckoned with.
In the case of Badfinger, by the time the Ass album came out, I think Joey wrote half the songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, he was very, the main thing with Joey to get him to finish one. But I found that worked with a lot of people that I've worked with. And it's like, they'll write the first verse and the chorus, and they go, wow, that's really great. But it's so great, I don't need to finish it. And that's where the producer has to come and go, wait a minute. And that's why George Martin, rest in peace, you can say the fifth Beatle, but he was. What he brought to them was unthinkably beautiful. And sometimes as a producer, you have to let the artist know that they're doing something really right or really wrong. And Joey was a listener. I would say stuff to Joey. There's one thing that I don't know if you guys have the record, but it was a song, I think it's called Rainy Day Man.
Yep.
That we wrote. And he was sharing a solo with Paul Santo, and they were going back and forth. And Joey played the solo that sounded kind of Indian almost. And he goes, oh, no, we have to do that again. And that was the day that Julian Lennon came to the studio to sing backing vocals. Mm-hmm. I went, Julian, will you listen to this and tell me what you think? All right, sure. And I played, and I said, I'm not going to say what it is, but Joey wants to redo the solo because he thinks it's too ethnic. and so I say to the engineer, play it on 11. Like, I like that soft music. Like, let me save my ears and play it on 2. No, turn it up. Let's feel that stuff. So we do it, and it gets to the solo, and Joey's solo just rips. And it had those weird, sort of, not bluesy, almost minor key thing. And he goes, did you hear it? Did you hear it, Julian? And Julian went like, I kind of like the Jewish part because it sounded like, it had the, and then I went, hey, son of a Beatle telling you he likes it. And Joey called me a name, gave me the finger, and it's on the record. On the record. I had to share that.
Yeah. Monroe Quinn loved playing the part, actually. He copped it, and he just said it's the strangest little piece of work. And he's the guitarist who was
so
at
he learned that for the show.
Yeah. And he said it's the quirkiest thing, and he says, I love it. It's funny you pointed that out because he contacted me when he was scoring it. And he goes,
but any guitar player would go, what the hell was that? But you
Yeah,
know
but
what?
you know what? That's what you need.
That's what
You know,
you
I even taught my daughters in writing music. I said, when you know what's coming up, make a left turn. You
there
know,
you got it, Drew. So right, man.
you
So
know,
right.
and I feel like that's what went on with that little piece of music right there. You know?
Well, when you guys go back and hear it, it's the first solo on that thing, and you're gonna go, "Oh my God, it sounds like Ravi Shankar." It was a different thing, but I loved it. And then Joey ended up loving it in the end, but it was a struggle.
Yeah, that's a great song. That was the first single, if you want to call it a single, whatever a single is these days.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Anyway, um, I wanted to point out, and sometimes I equate this with Ringo, because Ringo has said that, his dream was always to be in a band with musicians that he admires and goes out and plays with them. I think that's all that Joey ever wanted. I think he would have been happy if he spent the rest of his life going out performing, even if it was small clubs, as long as he can make a living from it.
I
Oh
agree.
yeah.
Well,
I,
you could just
You know,
tell, even in the Badfinger days, he got such great joy out of just being on stage. I mean, there's some clips on YouTube that I watch from time to time. I think it was the old Kenny Rogers variety show
Yeah.
where they're lip syncing to one of the big hits, and Joey's just completely mugging for the camera. Every time the camera's
Yeah.
on him, he's smiling and shaking his. It's just wonderful to see. Just
he was a
somebody
funny
having so
guy.
much fun. Yeah.
Do you think he enjoyed performing live more than in the studio?
Hmm. I don't know.
well,
I think he just got great joy out of making music. And live, I saw him live several times, and just there was never any sense that he was going through the motions. It was just, I'm here. I love these songs. I love playing for everyone here. And it was just that, that joy really came through to everyone who was in the crowd. Even when he was at Beatle Fest signing autographs, just
Hmm.
the most approachable, kind, gracious gentleman. It was just, he was a joy to be around. I wish I could have known him.
Well,
that's
the thing
true.
is with him on stage, something I mentioned before we went live. Uh, he got up there like a 22-year-old, but the thing was he was equally as humble with everyone else as far as always willing to pass off the to the other guitarist solos and stuff. But he always had the energy that looked like he could be nowhere else. And you're talking before about, him being, you know, how did he get past all this stuff? How did he manage to rise above it? And I mean, there's a string of history that musicians, when they're in their kind of funk for whatever reason it is, it's the music themselves that brings them back to earth. And you talk about playing live,
Saves.
you know, he could eat it
Well,
up, and that's what
well,
worked.
one of it came. One of the last things he said to me was he'd like to have some success because he'd like to leave a good legacy for his kids.
Wow.
You
He was a
know,
beautiful what a beautiful man.
yeah,
And you know what? I was just thinking too during the Beatles Fest, Drew, when we would be playing stuff, and once I would be and you always allowed me to be the maniac that I am, and then we would do that version of Working Class Hero,
Yeah,
or we would do some other song that wasn't necessarily Joey friendly. We'd always throw him a solo on something that wasn't Badfinger or something that wasn't this, and he
exactly.
just was
Yeah,
smiling and he was in heaven. And whether
yes,
he
he
was
was.
making money or making nothing, he was
and
a
what I loved about his playing specifically was just he was an open player. He didn't clutter. He very, like you mentioned earlier, melodic.
yep.
And that's my favorite kind of player to work with. I like people who think about the voicings. Chops are one thing, but melody and how it ties into the overall work. And he could do it instantaneously.
And he
And
did.
one of my biggest regrets is not having recorded with him,
Yeah.
in all honesty. And it's a heartbreak that we have to be here because he passed. I mean, it's a great legacy in a sense to have him recognized, but the fact that I wish we'd do this while we're all alive.
Yeah, sure,
It's
You
it,
know?
it's kind of scary
sure.
now because so many people that are around my age, you get Eric Carmen, you get Denny Lane, you get Joey. You can start naming it, Bobby Caldwell, Bubba, start naming all of these guys, and they're all taking the dirt nap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we should still be here.
And I know the music lives on, and that's great to hear. But there was nothing like being on stage with him and Drew and Billy. We all three of us know that when you were there and you were playing, you were like looking right at him and watching him play. I miss that.
And the toothy grin, you know that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
toothy grin when I'm taking the solo and I look over at him, he's just toothy grin. I miss him. It's still a very soft spot. I just kept quiet for a little while. He was just a good soul, and I miss him. It's the
yeah.
city.
No, well, he's definitely missed. That will
Yes.
be, you know. I mean, I'm still hoping that somebody's going to try to do a Badfinger movie because it's such a
Yeah.
tragic story
Yeah.
and such a beautiful story. And I was actually thinking of trying to write a screenplay on it because Joey told me stuff that nobody knows. And who's the kid that's a pop star now? He looks like a leprechaun.
Who?
I don't know.
Who? Help me with a name. He plays the guitar, red hair.
Ed Sheeran?
Ed Sheeran, yes.
You said leprechaun and that, yeah.
Yeah, I know that
that's
threw
right.
you off, but all of a
Thank you,
sudden,
John.
but you know what? I was watching him perform, and if he ever did want to act, he could be Peter Ham.
Mm.
You know,
Ah,
Ah, yeah.
and he could bloody pull it off because he's got the voice, he can play, and the legacy of Badfinger would be fantastic.
You know, there is a movie that's in production right now about power pop music. It's provisionally titled The Power Pop Movie. And it's been in production for some time, and they interviewed Joey for it. And the first, I'd say, about 15, 20 minutes of this 90-minute movie is all about Badfinger. And it's very touching and very sad, but Joey has some really good quotes in it. So hopefully that sees the light of day soon.
Let's hope so. I mean, it's a band that shouldn't be forgotten. Are they in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by chance?
No, they're not.
Okay, well then that's something that we need to do.
Unfortunately, I don't even think they've been in the discussion.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
That's terrible.
Well, Billy, you should be there too, you bastard.
yeah.
Well, no, I don't. I never thought I was that guy.
Well,
I
no,
was
you're
right.
that guy. Hey, if they nominate you, I'll go as you.
Yeah, that I'd
Get
watch.
some petitions going here.
Yes. Anyway, when you think about it, Billy J, Badfinger, Harry Nilsson, why aren't those guys in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
The Raspberries?
Raspberries, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Menudo? Well, maybe not Menudo.
And that when it comes to Badfinger, their albums are so solid all the way through. And as much as I love the four big hits, there's so many other great songs that that I wish that the public would get to hear. And so, it's up to us to spread the word through podcasts and radio, if people are still listening to the radio, and I hope they still are.
I always will. I always will.
One of the great things about Badfinger is you can dive into any of their albums at any time. And I've been doing this and just pulling out a song that I hadn't thought about in a while, and then listening to it and thinking, "Oh my God, what a masterpiece!" The latest one for me was "Name of the Game." Oh my God, what a song that is! And very few people talk about it, but it gives me chills. It really does.
Well, it's an interesting thing on the Joey album. There's a song called "Shine" that he had written with Pete, and then they brought me in as the next guy, and then Joey approached the family to give Pete the credit, and they went, "Oh no, Joey, you just go ahead, just you take it." And I don't know if that bothered him, but if that's what the family was saying, applaud it. And it's a great song. Mickey Dolenz singing all the background, and he couldn't get away from Badfinger even when he wasn't in it anymore.
Yeah,
it's the whole thing. And I think it's a sad story.
Yeah. there's a few songs here that I just wanted to mention that are favorites of mine, of Joey's, and I think Darren covered about 90% of my choices here. But
And mine too.
like Suitcase, obviously, Sweet Tuesday Morning, Love Me Do, Badfinger's Love Me Do, which is a really good rocker, and I love the fills from Mike Gibbons on the drums on that. I think Darren said Icicles, which is very much very Beatley. The Winner from S, great rocker. Like Darren said, the medleys on Wish You Were Here. Um, there's a song called In My Dreams on one of his solo albums, which is really gorgeous. Um, on Be True to Yourself, I love the title track and Rainy Day Man. The song Heaven is gorgeous.
Yeah, I think so too.
Slow song, but it's really very melodic and oh, I love
It's
that.
great.
Better Tomorrow, which starts off kind of high.
I mean, I liked them all, and it was such a joy to have his heart put in my hands, so I could make it be. Because what ends up happening, we all get older. We all either do a blues album or we move to Nashville, and
Blues album.
none of that should happen.
Hmm.
I mean, I think he's afraid to do this one has a chorus. Yeah, they're supposed to. And he got into it in the end, and he started loving it and coming up with the suggestions that I followed his lead. Once again, I'm lucky.
Well, I certainly hope, and on my channel here, and I bring it up in all my Beatles news breaks. There's a record label Y&T that's been putting out a whole bunch of demos of Pete Ham and Tom Evans, and they put out the Head First album. So it's really great that all this unreleased stuff is coming out. But I also would like to
And what's the record label called again?
Y&T. It stands for Yesterday and Today.
YNT.
Y&T.
YNT.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with the Mavericks,
Oh yeah, sure.
Tom
they
Evans.
started out on Y&T. The very first Mavericks album was on Y&T. And I know that and I forget his name, forgive me, who runs Y&T.
Rich Galua.
Posts often about Raul Malo, who is battling cancer right now, but yeah, they're a good label, good people, and put out some great records. Ken, can I chime in with a memory
Okay.
of Joey's? Because Joey played a pretty important role in my career. For those who don't know me, Ken found me outside his house one day. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm at WFUV radio in New York City for the past 41 years on the air. And the very first interview I ever did was with Joey Molland. I had never interviewed anyone before, and I was a very young, wet behind the ears DJ at the old college radio, WFUV, back in the day. It was 1987, and Joey and Mike Gibbons had Badfinger afloat again, and they were guests at Beatle Fest with Billy Preston, and my goal was to interview, I guess, both guys from Badfinger and Billy Preston. I ended up cornering Joey and his brother Dougie at the hotel bar in Secaucus when it was Meadowlands Hilton in '87. I did not know what I was doing. I was 17 years old. Again, this is the very beginning of who knew this was even going to be a career for me. But I had the tape machine, I had the mic, and a friend of mine was going to help me with the equipment. And I just went over to him, and Joey couldn't have been nicer. He did not have to talk to me. It was obvious that I was completely green. And next Sunday afternoon, I guess we must have set up a time. I met him in his hotel room in the in the Crown Plaza, and he spent um close to 2 hours talking with me.
Wow.
And again, I think about that now because I've come so far in 40 years that I cringe at the thought of some of the questions I might have asked him and the fanboy that I probably sounded like. I tell you the truth, I wasn't even aware that Tom Evans had died because it wasn't a news story. And it was about 4 years before, and I brought Tom up in the interview. And Joey was very cool about it. And he said, I hate to say this, but Tom died as well. He must have saw the look on my face. And he was explaining that it just didn't make the papers. You wouldn't have known. In I guess it was 1983, I believe. And this was about 4 years later that I interviewed Joey. So he couldn't have been kinder. And a friend of mine who had come with me, the two of them hit it off. Next thing I know, we were hanging out at some Badfinger shows in 87 when they would play in the Northeast. And one of my regrets was that I really didn't have another shot to talk to Joey as a quote unquote professional, because I could have done a bazillion times better interview with him. No, I know so much more about his career than I did then, but in a way, that conversation that Sunday afternoon in 1987, in late February, early March, played a role in creating a radio monster here in a career that continues on today at the same radio station, but it's changed a lot through the decades. So yeah, so Joey was there. Joey, I don't think remembered, which I was surprised because my friend that I had with me was very distinctive, and I don't know if Joey did too many interviews with teenage wannabe DJs who thought one of his ex-band members was still alive that was dead. And he spent 2 hours with me. And then next thing you know, I'm at shows of Badfinger shows, going back to the hotel with them. That doesn't sound right, but it was all my little brief taste of rock and roll lifestyle.
Oh,
But
great.
he didn't seem to remember when he came back to Beatle Fest many years later. Maybe it was the hair wasn't there anymore, but he was a hero, and he got the ball rolling in a way for me.
Well, if I
And
can interject for a second on that, Darren, that was the very first show I worked with Joey and his mate and Billy
80,
Preston.
87, yeah,
Yeah, that was the
yeah,
very first show
yeah.
my
Because
band
I had
worked
been
with
going to
him
the
and
fest for a few years.
Billy Preston, as a matter of
Yeah,
fact. Yeah.
yeah. They didn't have. I had been. This was like the fourth year I went to the fest. They didn't have guests like Badfinger and Billy Preston at the same time, so that was like a big draw.
Yeah.
So
That was a hell of a show, and I never forget it. And I had two Badfinger members to play with at the
Mike
time.
Gibbons, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and it was amazing. Yeah, and like with Billy Preston, you know,
I know.
forget it. I just floated home for the next month and a half. I don't think
Absolutely.
I touched the ground.
Absolutely.
Cool,
Yeah,
yeah.
good
I mean,
times.
once again, that's where I say that we're lucky that we had the chance not only to be around it, but to kind of be involved in it.
Yeah,
So there's Drew
Yeah.
on stage with Billy Preston, Gibbons, and Joey. It's like, wow, what's wrong with this?
I keep saying to myself, what the hell am I doing here? I'm looking around and
No, you will. Hey, I've seen you tinkle on those ivories, and you can play the piano too.
yeah.
And those of us who have the privilege to interview a lot of these people, like I've known Billy since the 80s. Billy used to live on Long Island, and he used to drive all the way from Long Island by himself to the radio station in New Jersey that I worked at. I know I lived on Long Island. It was a 70-mile ride for me. And Billy used to go to the station by himself several times. So I've known him all these years. Joey was one of the first interviews that I did in New Jersey on WDHA. And I felt, very privileged to have been his friend. Anytime I saw him, his arms would come right out. You know, like Hug Me. So same thing with you, Mark, and
Yep.
all of you.
Yeah. We're lucky. All of us are lucky.
We're all
Very
very
lucky.
You
These are
know?
just a few of the other CDs. This is an Ivy's CD that came out of demos. Okay. How much is
And is that on T
Y&T?
and
Y&T.
Y&T.
YNT?
This is Shine On. This is a tribute to Pete Ham. It's a double CD with a lot of different artists covering Pete's music. It's got Melanie on there, doing Without You. This is
Really?
one of Melanie's last recordings. It's got Gwen Gardens here. This is more Pete Ham demos, and there's a new one called Acoustic, which I can't find my copy of, but it's somewhere here. And here's I Won the Fight from Billy J. Kramer.
Yay.
Yay. And you know, there's actually, and it was years ago when like Tower Records was still around. I was a huge Jerry Rafferty fan, only because once again, you know, Steelers Wheel, I don't know why it couldn't get more Beatley.
Right.
Sure.
And he released a cassette of his songwriting demos, Jerry Rafferty. And I played it in my car. And then obviously because of the era when CDs weren't even invented yet, I ended up losing that cassette. And I've been trying all of my life to find the Jerry Rafferty demo collection.
Oh,
He was great.
something about demos. There's like an innocence to them, you know, seeing what they're like embryonic stage, you know.
It's the honesty. That's
Yeah.
why the White Album by the Beatles is so incredible, because it kind of has that feeling to it for me.
You know, as long as you're here, Mark, the
Yeah.
song Star from Steelers Wheel, which is a favorite of mine, very Beatley.
So they made you a star.
Did that influence So You Are a Star?
No, as a matter of fact, it wasn't. There was actually, I had written it before that,
Oh, okay.
and it was weird because I think Jeff Lynne was in ELO, and I don't know if it was Can't Get You Out of My Head. I have my years all mixed up, but we kind of bumped him, and he went, "Well, you sound like me." I said, "Well, you sound like the Beatles."
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ringo would even say to him something, "Hey, Jeff, have you stolen any of our songs recently?" Just to be the Liverpudlian sense of humor that he is. No, I still love him, though.
Oh, yeah.
Ken, before we wrap, I want to ask Mark a question. When are you putting out a new record, and when are the old Hudson Brothers things getting reissued?
Yeah. And when is that reunion happening?
Here's what the thing is. You know, I got a phone call from Ken Sharp,
Uh-huh.
putting together. He had a power pop book, and they were doing a tribute to the Raspberries, and Rick Springfield was doing it. The Indigo Girls, just people, John Waite, all doing it. He goes, "It would be such an honor to get the Hudson Brothers." So I called up my brothers, Siegfried and Roy, and I went, "Come on, guys, we're doing this song." And we did. And Tommy Allen, drummer,
Blast
friend of
Cubes.
Joey's,
Yeah.
he produced it, and it's great. And I want to get the Hudson Brothers stuff back, but we were on so many other labels that it's tough to put it all together. The reunion is still going to happen. It's all a matter of scheduling. Every brother's doing something different now.
Hmm.
You know what? And this is how I am. Let's sit down for a week, come up with 8 songs, and the rest is all our bad sense of humor, talking to each other, making fun of each other. And I went, why don't we just go to a club anywhere? Doesn't have to be millions of people. Let's just go do it again. Like just do it. And that's kind of what Joey was doing at the making of this record. He just wanted to do it again. And that's what I'm trying to think through with the Hudson Boys, so we can do that. But songwriting has begun. There's some pretty cool stuff in the pipeline. We just have to be in the same city so I can put it down. And with the brother, I'm not allowed to produce, which pisses me off, because Bill is the oldest brother who's incredibly good looking, married Goldie Hawn, and he's that guy. Brett was the young brother who looked like McCartney with big lips, and he was the cover of Tiger Beat and 16 magazine, and I was just talented and well endowed. So
I think that's what you should call your next solo album. Talented and well endowed. There's your title.
Oh, we lost him.
Uh-oh. Is it something I said?
I think so.
He's well endowed. He probably knocked his phone.
Well, you know what's interesting, I'll bring this up really quickly, is Mark mentioned that Raspberry's tribute album, the band that I'm in called Pop Dudes, we have a song on that one too. So we're going to be on the same CD as the Hudson Brothers, so we're very excited about that.
Cool.
Okay.
Very cool.
And any idea release or when we may start hearing about it?
I've heard August, September it's supposed to be out, so
okay.
not too long.
Label?
I'm not sure. Ken told me, but I can't remember, honestly.
Okay. We'll have to get Ken on this channel too, and talk power pop, talk Raspberries.
Yeah, Ken's a big Badfinger fan. Also, he's interviewed in the Power Pop movie talking about Raspberries and about Badfinger.
Yeah. He's another one I could have had on the show here. It's countless the number of people I could have invited. The show tonight, which shows how much Joey is appreciated. So, unless Mark pops back in, thanks to all you guys for doing this and sharing your memories of Billy, and tremendous loss, but the music will continue to live on, and let's keep playing his music and Badfinger music and keeping it out there.
Yeah.
If I might, I'd like to point your listeners towards two songs they're both power pop songs. They were written about Badfinger. One is called Pete Ham, and it's an older song. It's by a band called Crash Into June. They were out of Memphis, but it's a great power pop song, and it's actually about Badfinger. The other one is actually titled Badfinger. It's by a group called Taylor Locke and the Roughs. And Taylor Locke used to be in a band called Rooney that was on a major label back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the song's called Badfinger, and it's wonderful. I know that one is on Spotify, so I think a lot of people would enjoy both of those. Good way to remember Joey and the rest of the guys.
Right.
Okay. Let's see if we can put up links for those two songs in the description box here. Okay. So, Billy, it's always a pleasure having you here. Come back whenever you want. You can take over the channel if you want.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay. John, it's great to have you here. We may have you back sooner than you realize.
It's definitely been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ken.
You got to get another trivia show going, and I hope to do a Brian Wilson tribute as well. Drew, great to have you here for the first time.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks, guys. It's good to see you all.
Yeah, it is great to see you, Drew.
Yeah,
and of course, you'll see Drew in Liverpool at the Chicago Fest for Beatle fans coming up. And Darren,
yeah, we'll see you Sunday, Drew.
We'll see you.
We'll see you both.
Sunday. I'll be there on Sunday, Drew.
Only Sunday.
Only Sunday, yeah.
That's all right. We'll rock them.
Pardon?
I said that's all right. We'll rock them.
Definitely.
And Darren, of course, you can catch on WFUV. What time of the week?
Monday through Thursday nights, East Coast, Eastern time. Monday through Thursday nights, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and Saturday afternoons from 1 until 4.
That's when I always hear you, because I'm in the car driving.
On Saturdays, yeah. Yeah, bats and owls listen to me from 10 till 2 a.m. during the week. And then I have to look presentable because the sun's out and people can actually see me on Saturday afternoons. But those are the times. And if you're not in the New York metro area and can't listen at 90.7 FM, we stream on our website, WFUV.org, O-R-G.
Okay. And I'll be seeing you in a couple of days for our next Thing Said Today podcast. We're going to be naming 10 of our favorite McCartney songs from the 2000s. Ooh. That'll be an interesting list. Okay, so thanks to all of you guys for doing this. Thank you, Mark Hudson. We really appreciate you being here, even if you had to
All
cut
right.
out at the end.
Good to see you.
Yeah. And thanks to all of you for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers. Good day.
God bless Joey Molland.
Joe.